Megan, it is so wonderful to have you with us today. Thank you so much for agreeing to answer 5 burning questions that our students and recent alums have. And I'm going to start off by asking you to introduce yourself.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Melissa. It's such a pleasure to speak as always. I always look back so fondly on my GW days. So my name is Meghan Demeter. I was in the ENRP program back 2016 to 2018 and lived in DC for a couple of years after that, working at Environmental Defense Fund. I'm now here in Paris, have been here for about 5.5 years, working at the UN Environment Program, specifically on a project called the International Methane Emissions Observatory, where I manage a team that is focused on using satellites to detect methane emissions and then notifying stakeholders in governments and in companies so that they can address those emissions.
Fabulous. I think people are going to remember a lot, and especially the word Paris. That's not something we hear in the videos very often and very exciting. And thank you for joining us. Even if it's virtual, it's from a long ways away. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in and start with what's the best networking advice you've received or would like to give?
So I remember really vividly being given this advice in one of my early internships, which was just to, if you are looking for a career mentor, to just ask the person that you're interested in being your mentor. And I think as I progress in my career, I see that a lot, that I would never offer myself up as a mentor, but I would be happy to fill that role if someone asked me to. And so I have subsequently taken that advice and asked someone to fill in a mentorship role for me. And I think most of us would share the experience that no one will ever say no to that, and that there's so much advice you can get through that channel.
Excellent. Yeah, I think people feel like they're asking somebody to do something very burdensome.
Right. And I think so often people are happy to, but it feels almost presumptuous to offer yourself as a mentor. And so sometimes it's like a missed opportunity in that sense.
Excellent. That's great advice. So talk a little bit about what actions you've taken that have impacted any of your job searches and kind of how that's played out for you.
Yeah, I think in that sense, from my perspective, it's being really attentive towards building connections and making connections while you're in a role. I've only done a sort of online job search once in my career, and had that initial job, which was actually supposed to be a very short term internship, turn into a full time job, turn into a different full time job. And all of that was through building connections with people both in the organization that I was currently with, to transform an internship to a full-time role, and then to make a shift to a different organization. So I would say really is keeping some of that networking and connection mentality even when you're in your role.
So beyond the mentoring piece, how else did you kind of develop or maintain those kinds of connections? Did you go out of your way to do that? Did it just sort of happen naturally?
I would say a little bit of both. And in one sense, I fostered, I think, a really good relationship with my manager, who then helped when I expressed an interest in a particular type of work, helped me identify where I could working on similar things or who I could be talking to. And so I think that's another piece is having someone who you can get that kind of advice from, and then really just feeling empowered to ask questions when you're interested in working on something. And sometimes that spark of curiosity, I think, can also help keep you in mind for other people as well.
Makes sense. So I'm going to change this question just a little bit. Thinking back to the first time when you were doing a search, what did you find most helpful in prepping for an interview? And I guess I would also say, you know, when you're looking at bringing people on, what do you suggest for people to do when they're prepping for interviews?
Yeah, my biggest thing that I tried to do at the time, but I feel even more strongly about it now, sitting on the other side of a lot of interview processes, is to come with questions, and not just questions about the logistics of the job, but questions about the organization and about the goals of the position and how the team approaches different problems. And I have always been really impressed by people who come with thoughtful questions, and the questions especially that I don't necessarily have an answer to off the bat as someone doing the hiring. Those tends to be the ones that really impress me.
Do you, so I'm going to just give you a situation that pops up a lot and just see what you think. A lot of times, students will tell me that they got a lot of their questions answered during the course of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that people should have a large volume of questions ready to go, or is it acceptable to say, you are uncanny, you've hit every one of the questions that I had, which were about X, Y, and Z. Thank you so much. How do you handle it? Or how, on your side, how does it seem when somebody says, I think you've answered the questions that I had?
Yeah, I think it's good and it can happen. I think it's good to keep a couple in your back pocket that are kind of unlikely to be answered. I've been asked some, along the lines of what would you envision I would achieve after 3 months in this position and then after a year in this position. And I think something like that is one that you're probably not going to answer every aspect of that throughout the course of the interview. And it's a good one maybe to keep if some of your more specific questions get answered. And I still think to me it shows that the person is interested in learning about the expectations and having a dialogue about that. So I think it's good to try to keep maybe a couple generic ones in addition to some more specific ones that could get answered. But of course, I wouldn't. I don't think that it's something that if your questions all get answered or ruling anyone out as a candidate. But it is a nice thing that I remember at the end of an interview as someone who asks good questions.
Great. Thinking back, how do you think your capstone, showcasing your capstone, um, maybe helped you, or how did you go about incorporating your capstone experience into your conversations with people?
Yeah, I'm one of the folks who got hired by the organization they did their capstone with. And so I think massively it helped me because I was able to build a lot of those connections during the capstone process. And not only that, but the team that I joined, I had learned so much about during that capstone process that it helped then my conversations onward. I became somewhat of a point of reference for a time on questions related to that subject. And then, later in my career in a different organization, my capstone with my colleagues was on methane emissions from the liquefied natural gas supply chain. And I now work on at an organization that focuses on methane emissions data. And so it taught me so much about a very niche subject matter that I've been able to reference back to time and time again. And I don't think it's necessarily true, or even the majority of cases, that everybody's capstone subject stays quite so nichely relevant to their field. But there were, I think, so many skills in terms of how you analyze data, how you talk about trends, how you take technical subject material and translate it to a non-technical audience that I've tried to pull from that experience doing the capstone into my career as well.
Yeah, sometimes people will say, well, it's not in the topic area that I was hoping it would be, but focusing on the skills and the experience that you build, regardless of topic area, can be extremely helpful, extremely useful.
Absolutely.
Okay, last question, although I think I snuck a couple of extras in there, but last formal question. What specific actions do you think you've taken that have been most impactful on your career advancement? You've obviously had quite a bit.
And maybe it's not quite a specific action, so to speak, but I think especially early in my career was this mentality of sort of saying yes to any opportunity that I had. And so sometimes that meant saying yes to joining a call that was maybe a little bit outside of what I thought I was doing, but I learned so much in, or attending an in person event because no one else was available to go. And I think that mentality, and actually sometimes it even meant on tasks, even if it was not the most fun task in the world, but I could do it. I think it helped me from a learning perspective, but then it also helped me be seen by the leadership of my team as someone who was eager to help and capable, and helped me advance in that sense on the team. So I try to uh, embody that sort of yes to opportunity perspective. And I think that has really helped me in my career.
Fabulous. Such great advice. I love the talk about networking. I love the talking about saying yes and showing up, which is
Mm-hmm.
that,
Absolutely.
you know, that's something that's really important that not everybody values, but the employers surely do
Yeah.
value that. They surely do. Megan, thank you so much for joining me today and answering these questions. I'm so grateful, and I know our students will really benefit from hearing your advice and your inspiration.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And again, just big thanks to GW for all of the years of excellent education and experience.
Okay, we're keeping in the video that last part. Take care.
Bye.